Hi, I'm Jim Tolles. I'm a spiritual teacher. I blog regularly at spiritualawakeningprocess.com, and I share videos here on my Jim Tolles YouTube channel. Today I want to talk about losing more desires after awakening, and I'm talking a little bit further along on the path. So there's the initial experiences that people will have in a spiritual opening. Spiritual openings are brief, they come and go. And then there are experiences after awakening, and oftentimes desire is lost. And depending on how much the ego is dissolved and how the person's experiencing that present moment, that actually can feel really good. It's usually when the ego comes back in later, it's like, wait, aren't I supposed to like these things? And that desire isn't there anymore, that they start to be kind of concerned or confused. That's a start. As we go on further, we lose even more desires and attachments to certain things, and I want to talk about that today. As a quick reminder, below this video, I have more resources that you can check out. Please do so. And there's also a free newsletter you can sign up for and a way to donate to support this channel. I often talk about losing fears because people want to get rid of those. And so it's a way to kind of draw people into the spiritual path. But we also lose desires too. And that is not as widely appreciated. However, if you've had an initial experience where you've lost a sense of that I and you kind of dissolve into oneness, or you drop into a level of peace, or it feels very blissful, you usually aren't desiring anything. And the more deeply you drop into a state like oneness, and the way we experience oneness, right? The experience of oneness and oneness itself are actually different. Probably a topic for another time. But the way we experience it is usually free of desire of anything. Like we don't need anything. We are here now. We are one with things. And these are words that we add in after the experience, usually not usually during, because during we're just dissolved. It's usually later we come back like, wait, what was that? So and depending on the person's ego, depends on how they will start to view it. Because if somebody really dissolved into it in the way they kind of think about themselves and about life, they're open to it, then that feels really good, and that actually tends to lead people towards trying to get it back. And as I've talked about many times in a lot of my videos and my blog posts, trying to get an experience back is a trap in and of itself. However, that interest to move towards the spiritual path, that's important. For others, it's scary. They're like, whoa, I suddenly didn't care about all sorts of things I thought I really cared about. I didn't care about clothes and partying. I didn't care about my job or my car, right? So I'm pointing towards some very surface level ones. We'll get to the deeper ones soon, because that's really where we're going to talk a lot today. And then the ego's like, aren't I supposed to want these things? Aren't I supposed to care about money? I mean, I really cared about money. I cared about these types of like very surface level desires can drop away initially. But at the time, we don't realize they're surface level. So let's also appreciate the different levels of desire, just like any attachment. So a surface level desire, like liking to party, right? It's built on other desires underneath it. And so you'll have kind of surface level what people see, or like the desires that drive addiction. People are used to like focusing on these surface level things. And surface level doesn't mean they don't cause a lot of problems like with addiction. It just means it's visible to us. And most of society focuses on what is visible. That's a problem, because usually what's driving us are the deeper invisible attachments. So this work that we do is to find the invisible, to find the unconscious, and to bring it to light. In bringing it to light, we can move through it. We can dissolve the attachments that are defining how we think and feel. So we drop a level to that sort of top level, like, well, why do we get into partying all the time? It's like, well, it's a way to go out and be social and to have fun. So that seems like a useful desire. And then we kind of drop underneath that. It's like, well, why do we need these things? And it's like, well, this is what I've always done, and this is the way I interact with people, and I don't know who I would be if I don't know and don't do this stuff. And then we say, well, why does that matter? It's like, and then we start to drop deeper and we start to get towards the core issues, right? We just move through the mid-level to the core issues and we start to get to these fears of unworthiness. We get to these fears of loneliness. If somebody's been neglected or felt abandoned in childhood, we find that down in the deeper core issues. And so we've dropped through these different layers. And so as we progress on the spiritual path, and particularly those with awakened energy that's pushing you through this path, you start to hit these layers and you have to reckon with them. You have to be like, oh, wow, I really do have this deeper desire to find approval from other people. That's a good mid-level issue. So the mid-level, right? So the desire for approval is usually built on these other things inside, like the fear of being alone. So if we don't have the fear of being alone, we don't really care as much about getting approval from other people. So here's this next desire. It's a very powerful one now. And it has a lot of different offshoots that go back up to the surface level in ways that we interact. And then you start to erode that desire. This desire for approval. And it can feel extremely physical. This really surprises people a lot. Just how physically we hold certain emotions and ideas. And it really is the deeper feeling states that drive how we think. We often confuse and add too much power to the mind. We're confused about its power. We don't fully reckon the body power and the emotional power that really drives how we think most of the time. And it's a two-way street. They're both everyone's talking to everything inside, but it's usually kind of a hot mess. Awakening starts to dissolve some of that mess inside. It starts to realign things so that the mind, heart, and body are all in greater harmony. That usually means going through a kind of sense of disharmony for a while. And that's what we often find when we're losing some of these deeper desires, and it's starting to show deeper issues inside, deeper disharmonies. And that's uncomfortable at times. And so a part of the ego, what happens as we're losing desires, part of the ego is so used to wanting things and covering things up beneath those desires. It's like, but shouldn't I want that approval, going back to the approval issue? And it gets confusing for the person because they've been playing this out in probably all their relationships. All these different ways that they think they have to act to get other people's approval. And it doesn't even necessarily mean that they're doing it well. That a lot of times people do things to try and make somebody else happy that doesn't actually make them happy, that they actually don't care about. That this person hasn't even engaged with the other people enough to find out what matters to them. And yet they're still trying to play this game. So it's like coming to somebody and offering them an orange when you never asked what they wanted to eat. And let's just say in this metaphor, they're allergic. And so they throw your orange away. And now you feel rejected. And they're probably not feeling pretty good either because like they're allergic to oranges in this metaphor. Right? This is the mess the ego makes. But we don't see this mess when we're in the middle of it. It's only as we're being pulled out of it and we're having more and more of these desires and attachments broken down so that we can start to see what we've been creating for ourselves that we begin to understand. But because we're in the middle of the mess, we go through these phases where we're losing more desires and our ego is getting more upset. It's like, aren't I supposed to want something? How am I going to live? The threats get louder. It usually has these threats even in the beginning, but they tend to get even louder as we work towards breaking through some of the deeper mid-level and core issues. When you start to break through core issues and you go through a really big release where you start to understand how much suffering you've been in, then there are deeper shifts inside. Deeper levels of commitment naturally arise in people that say, whoa, this spiritual path is for real, and I have had some serious suffering, and I am definitely going in the right direction now, because before I was just lost in this ongoing self-medication and self-numbing practice of living. And that's what a lot of people's practice is right now. It's just self-medication and self-numbing, and they're doing it with all sorts of different things. And so they desire different stories and ideas and experiences and physical stuff and just like all these things that we're grabbing at. That's what desire does. Desire likes to grab, to get things and to keep them. And then we start to find out that we actually don't need very much. And we start to actually understand what need is. See, there's a very big distinction between like an urge to drink water, an urge for food, and the desires to get labeled on top to have like one of those disgusting energy drinks and think that that's, quenching your thirst appropriately. Or to have a bunch of, sugary cookies and things like that and like think that that's actually feeding you, right? So that's how a lot of our urges and our desires get intermarried, but this is getting pulled apart as you lose more desires, as you start to see, actually my body wants food. It doesn't want this sugary garbage or this caffeinated garbage or this whatever. I mean, there's so much garbage, substances that are being put into human bodies that we don't need, that are just serving a lot of these unconscious desires. And as those unconscious desires break down, further changes in a person's life can arise. Now, this is an interesting time. And like any shift, when you're going through it, I invite you to keep coming back to awareness and to breathing and to being in these spaces of the unknown, because that will also be triggered. There's a bunch of nasty triggers that happen the deeper we go, and that fear of the unknown keeps coming back because it's such a powerful one for human beings. But losing desires is not losing the ability to do things or to take care of your needs or your family's needs. Actually, it's going to illuminate what those needs are and makes you more efficient and direct. That you don't waste money on stuff that's not helping your family be healthy or helping yourself be healthy. And these are things you notice the more you drop the desire and you integrate into that sort of next level of openness. So wisdom always kind of comes in hindsight. Maybe not always, but a lot of time it comes in hindsight where it's like, oh, that's what that was about. And that's what the cost of doing all that was. So I can only encourage you that as more desires are dissolved and deeper issues are revealed, relax into it. Breathe. You are not being harmed. You're being freed. These are my thoughts for today. Once again, I'm Jim Tolles. Feel free to check out my other videos and to check out my blog, spiritualawakeningprocess.com.